At my daughter's wedding, the groom's mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "You don't belong in the family photo." She even pushed me aside, thinking I would walk away quietly, but I smiled and replied, "Check who paid for the venue. If you're feeling hooked already, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful life stories and drop a comment to tell me where you're watching from. My name is Margaret Lawson. I am 62 years old, a widow, and the proud mother of my only daughter, Emily. For most of my life, it has just been the two of us. When my husband passed away, Emily was still in middle school, and I promised myself that I would give her the life she deserved, no matter how hard it got. I worked as a nurse for decades, picking up long shifts and saving every extra dollar. Emily grew into a kind and ambitious young woman. She studied hard, built a career for herself, and eventually fell in love with Andrew Miller. From the moment I saw them together, I knew she had found someone who truly cared for her. Andrew was respectful, responsible, and supportive. The only challenge was his mother, Patricia. She carried herself like she owned every room she entered, and she often made subtle remarks about me being too simple or not on their level. I usually ignored her, telling myself Emily's happiness mattered more than my pride. When Emily got engaged, she told me her dream was to have a beautiful wedding where both families came together to celebrate love. I wanted to give her that dream, even if it meant dipping deep into my savings. So I paid for the venue. A bright, elegant hall with high ceilings, flowers lining the walls, and space big enough to hold everyone important in her life. It was the biggest gift I could give her, and I didn't regret it for a moment. On the wedding day, I was overwhelmed with emotion. I helped Emily into her dress, smoothing the lace and adjusting her veil. My little girl looked radiant, and for a moment, I saw the same child who once danced barefoot in our backyard, pretending she was a bride. Tears filled my eyes as she whispered, "Thank you for everything, Mom. I couldn't have done this without you." Those words reminded me why every sacrifice I made was worth it. When we arrived at the venue, guests filled the hall with laughter and excitement. The air buzzed with music, the clinking of glasses, and the smell of flowers. I felt proud as I looked around, knowing this place was the result of years of hard work. Emily and Andrew looked so happy, surrounded by their friends and family. I stood quietly to the side, taking it all in, my heart full. I thought the day would be nothing but joy. I didn't know that Patricia had other plans, and that before long, she would try to erase me from one of the most important moments of my daughter's life. The ceremony was beautiful. Watching Emily walk down the aisle on Andrew's arm filled me with more joy than I can describe. Her smile lit up the room, and Andrew looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. When they exchanged vows, I held back tears, feeling proud that I had helped guide her to this moment. For years, I had prayed she would find a partner who loved her fully, and seeing it happen felt like an answered prayer. After the ceremony, everyone moved into the garden area of the venue for family photos. The flowers were in bloom, the sun was shining, and the photographer arranged groups with practiced ease. First, there were shots of Emily and Andrew, then ones with the bridesmaids and groomsmen. Everyone laughed and clapped, celebrating each moment. I stood nearby, waiting patiently for my turn. Finally, the photographer said, "All right, let's bring in the families." I stepped forward with a smile, smoothing my dress as I walked toward Emily. That was when Patricia intercepted me. She moved quickly, her heels clicking against the stone path, and blocked me before I could reach my daughter. She leaned close so the photographer and guests wouldn't hear, her perfume sharp in the air. In a low voice, she hissed, "You don't belong in the family photo. This is for close family only." I froze. Her words hit me like ice water poured down my back. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "I'm the bride's mother," I managed, my voice shaking. Patricia gave me a tight smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, but this is our side of the family. Let's keep the photos clean and proper." Then, with a subtle but firm push, she nudged me to the side. To the people around us, it looked like nothing more than a polite adjustment, but to me, it was deliberate. It was her way of erasing me from the memory. My heart pounded in my chest. I glanced toward Emily, who was standing in the center, holding Andrew's hand. She looked between us, her smile faltering as she realized what had just happened. Her eyes filled with worry, and I could tell she wanted to say something, but she hesitated, trapped between keeping the peace and standing up for me. Andrew shifted awkwardly too, glancing at his mother with discomfort, but he said nothing. The silence of both of them cut almost as deeply as Patricia's word. I stood there, humiliated, my hands trembling as I clasped them in front of me. Guests nearby began whispering. A woman I didn't know leaned to her husband and asked, "Isn't that the bride's mother?" Another man frowned and shook his head. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to walk out of the garden and leave them to their perfect pictures, their perfect image, their perfect story without me in it. But at the same time, a storm rose inside me. My mind flashed through years of sacrifice, working overnight shifts at the hospital, packing Emily's lunches before dawn, staying awake to help with her homework after 12-hour days. I thought about every penny I had saved for her education, every birthday I made special even when money was tight, and every holiday where I filled the house with warmth so she would never feel what I felt, the absence of a father. And now, on the day I had dreamed about since she was a little girl, I was being told I didn't belong in the very photo that marked the start of her new life. I swallowed hard, forcing my tears back, but the ache in my chest only grew heavier. Emily's nervous glance burned into me, and for the first time that day, my joy was replaced with pain. Patricia stood tall beside her son, proud and satisfied, as though she had won some invisible battle. She thought her wealth and her presence made her the only mother that mattered. I looked down at the stone path beneath my feet and clenched my fists. A quiet voice inside me whispered that maybe it would be easier to walk away, to keep the peace, to let them have their picture without me. But another, stronger voice rose up. Why should I leave? Why should I let myself be erased from my own daughter's wedding? The photographer adjusted his camera, waiting for everyone to get into place. My absence was obvious, but Patricia pretended not to notice. She stood with her hand on Andrew's arm, her smile wide, her eyes gleaming with victory. The whispers around me grew louder. I knew I had two choices: step back and let her define my place, or step forward and remind everyone exactly who I was. I felt a surge of strength rise inside me, the same strength that had carried me through years of being both mother and father to Emily. I straightened my shoulders, wiped the moisture from my eyes, and prepared to act. I stood there in the garden, my heart pounding so hard it felt like the entire room could hear it. Patricia's words still echoed in my head. "You don't belong in the family photo." Her push had left more than just a physical sting. It left me humiliated, stripped of my place as Emily's mother in front of strangers and family alike. For a few seconds, I honestly thought about giving in, about stepping back and pretending it didn't matter. That's what I had done in the past whenever she looked down on me. I told myself peace was worth more than pride, but as I looked at Emily standing in the center of the photo area, her smile trembling, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about pride anymore. This was about the truth. Emily was my daughter. I had raised her with every ounce of strength I had after her father passed away. I had worked the long nights, gone without new clothes, skipped meals to make sure she had enough. And now, after years of sacrifice, someone wanted to erase me from the most important day of her life? No, not this time. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and walked closer to the group. My legs were shaky, but I forced myself to move with purpose. As I reached the edge of the gathering, Patricia turned and narrowed her eyes, her lips curling into that same sharp smile. She leaned toward me again and whispered, "I told you, you don't belong here." But instead of lowering my head like I always had, I met her gaze directly. I felt my voice steady itself, carrying the weight of years of silence finally breaking. "Before you push me out again," I said calmly, "check who paid for the venue we're standing in." The words slipped out smoother than I expected, almost like they had been waiting in my chest all along. Patricia's smile froze. Her eyes widened just enough for me to see the crack in her confidence. She hadn't expected me to fight back. The air around us changed instantly. Conversations nearby hushed, and the photographer lowered his camera, sensing something important was happening. Emily's head whipped toward me, her mouth slightly open. Andrew stared between his mother and me, his face caught between shock and realization. Patricia's cheeks flushed pink, but she quickly tried to recover. "That's not the point," she hissed, her voice lower now, though I could see she was rattled. "This is about family." I kept my eyes locked on hers and answered with firmness I didn't know I still had. "And I am family. I am Emily's mother. That fact doesn't change because you say it should." For a long second, no one moved. Then I heard someone in the crowd, one of Emily's bridesmaids, whisper loudly, "She's right. She belongs in the photo." A ripple of agreement passed through the group, and suddenly, Patricia no longer looked untouchable. She looked cornered. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Mom," she said, her eyes filled with tears. "Come stand next to me." She reached her hand out, and in that moment, all my fear melted away. I walked past Patricia, my steps steadier than they had been all night. She moved slightly to the side, her face tight with embarrassment. I took Emily's hand and stood by her, our arms linked. I felt the warmth of her touch, her silent way of telling me she was proud. The photographer raised his camera again, now with a renewed confidence in his voice. "All right, let's capture this moment. Everyone together, please." As I looked into the lens, I no longer felt like an outsider. I felt like what I had always been, the mother who gave everything for her daughter, the woman who had every right to stand there in the center of her child's new beginning. That was the turning point for me. I realized that I had spent too many years shrinking myself to avoid conflict, letting others decide where I fit. But in that moment, I took my place back, not with anger, not with a scene, but with dignity and truth. As I stood beside Emily, holding her hand tightly, the world around me seemed to slow down. My heart was still racing from what I had just said, but for the first time in years, I felt my voice had been heard. Patricia stood frozen, her smile stiff, her eyes darting around at the guests who were now whispering and watching closely. She had expected me to stay quiet, to accept my place in the shadows, but instead, I had stood tall. The photographer cleared his throat, clearly unsure whether to continue. "Shall we?" he asked carefully, raising his camera halfway. Before he could finish, Andrew stepped forward. His face was pale, but his jaw was set with determination. He looked at his mother first, then at me. "Mom," he said firmly, addressing Patricia, "this isn't right. Margaret belongs here. She's Emily's mother. Without her, none of us would even be standing here today. And frankly, without her, we wouldn't even be in this beautiful venue right now." His voice carried through the crowd, and the whispers turned into nods of agreement. Patricia's eyes widened, as if her own son's words had betrayed her. "Andrew," she whispered sharply, "not now. This is not the time for—" But Andrew cut her off. "No, Mom, it is the time. You've had too many moments where your pride overshadowed kindness. Today is about love and unity, not control. And I won't let you treat Emily's mother as if she doesn't belong." Emily's grip on my hand tightened. She looked at me with tears shimmering in her eyes, then turned to the crowd. "My mother is my family. She raised me by herself after my father died. She gave me everything I needed, even when it meant she went without. If she isn't in these photos, then I won't be either, because I won't take a family photo that erases the very person who made me who I am." The garden fell silent for a heartbeat, the weight of her words sinking in. Then, slowly, people began nodding. One of the bridesmaids spoke up, her voice loud and clear. "She belongs in the photo, period." A groomsman added, "She should be in the front row. She's the bride's mom." The photographer, regaining his confidence, stepped forward with a firm nod. "All right then, let's get the bride's mother right in the center, next to her daughter." He gestured toward me, his tone leaving no room for argument. Patricia's face turned red, her lips pressed into a thin line. For once, she had no words. She looked around, realizing the tide had turned against her. Guests were no longer impressed by her airs of superiority. They were disappointed. They had seen her cruelty exposed in the very place she wanted to shine. I felt Emily pull me gently forward, placing me right by her side in the center of the group. Andrew moved to her other side, placing his arm protectively around her shoulder. I stood there between them, my daughter on one side, her husband on the other, and for the first time in years, I felt fully visible, fully honored. The photographer lifted his camera. "Big smiles, everyone," he called, and as the shutter clicked, I held my head high. That photo, I knew, would capture not just a moment, but a victory. Not for pride, but for love. When the session ended, people began approaching me. One older guest, a friend of Patricia's, touched my arm gently. "You're a strong woman," she said softly. "It takes courage to stand tall like that." Another guest, someone from Andrew's side, smiled warmly and added, "Now we understand where Emily gets her grace. She has you to thank for that." I thanked them, though my voice shook from emotion. I wasn't used to attention. I wasn't used to being acknowledged like this. But in that moment, I realized it wasn't about recognition for me. It was about making sure Emily knew I would never allow anyone to erase the role I had played in her life. Patricia stood to the side, clearly uncomfortable, her power slipping away. She didn't speak to me, but her silence said everything. For the first time, she had been challenged publicly, and she had lost. The control she thought she had didn't matter anymore, not when truth was laid bare for everyone to see. As we walked back into the hall, Emily hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear, "Mom, thank you. Thank you for standing up, not just for yourself, but for me. I needed everyone to know what you mean to me." Andrew followed close behind, leaning in quietly. "I'm sorry for my mother's behavior," he said. "She was wrong, and I'll make sure she understands that. But I'm grateful for you. You gave me the woman I love, and I'll never forget that." Hearing those words, I felt something inside me settle, like a wound beginning to close. I no longer felt humiliated or erased. I felt seen, respected, and honored, not only by my daughter, but by the man she chose to marry. That day, the climax wasn't just about reclaiming a place in a photograph. It was about reclaiming my worth, reminding myself and everyone else that I was not an outsider to be pushed aside. I was the mother of the bride, the woman who had given everything for her daughter, and I belonged. After the photos were taken and everyone moved back inside the hall, I felt a mixture of relief and calm that I hadn't experienced in years. For once, I wasn't carrying the weight of silence. For once, I hadn't let myself be pushed into the background. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from pride. Emily never left my side for the rest of the evening. At dinner, she pulled out a chair next to her and insisted I sit with her and Andrew at the head table. "Mom, this is your place," she whispered firmly, her eyes shining with determination. Patricia sat farther down the table, stiff and tight-lipped, avoiding eye contact with me, but that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that my daughter saw me, claimed me, and honored me in front of everyone. As the night went on, I noticed a shift in how people treated me. Guests who earlier hadn't spared me more than a polite nod now came to shake my hand or share kind words. One woman smiled warmly and said, "You must be so proud. Emily is graceful, strong, and kind. Now, I see where she gets it from." A man Andrew worked with leaned across the table and told me, "Your strength shows through her." That was a powerful moment out there. Each word made my chest swell with something I hadn't felt in a long time: recognition. Andrew, too, kept showing his gratitude. At one point, he raised his glass toward me and said quietly, "I want you to know how much I respect you. You gave Emily the values that made her who she is today. I won't forget that." His sincerity touched me deeply, and I silently thanked God that my daughter had chosen a man willing to stand by her, and by me, even against his own mother. Patricia remained silent throughout most of the evening. I caught her watching me from across the room more than once, her expression unreadable. Perhaps she was embarrassed, perhaps she was angry, or perhaps she was finally realizing that her wealth and control didn't outweigh the years of love and sacrifice I had given my daughter. For once, her power over the room had crumbled, and the dignity of truth had spoken louder than her pride. Later that night, after the dances and the speeches, Emily and I shared a quiet moment together in the bridal suite. She hugged me tightly, her veil slightly askew, her makeup smudged from happy tears. "Mom," she whispered, "you were incredible today. You've always been my rock, but today you showed everyone what I've known all my life. You're the strongest person I know." Her words pierced straight through me. All the long nights I had worked, all the tears I had cried in secret, all the moments I thought I wasn't enough, it all felt worth it in that one embrace. I kissed her forehead and whispered back, "I did it all for you. I always will." As I drove home later that night, the streets were quiet and the stars shimmered above me. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the confrontation, and the redemption. I realized something important. Sometimes silence can be mistaken for weakness. I had stayed quiet for too long, letting Patricia define me as less than what I was. But love and sacrifice deserve to be seen, and dignity doesn't mean staying silent when someone tries to erase you. It means standing tall, speaking truth, and doing it without anger. The lesson I carried from that day is simple but powerful. Respect isn't always handed to you, even when you've earned it. Sometimes you have to claim your place with courage, not through shouting or fighting, but through quiet strength that no one can deny. I didn't need to argue with Patricia. All I had to do was remind her, and everyone else, of the truth. And the truth was undeniable. I belong. That photo we took together will one day sit in Emily's home, framed and displayed for her children to see. And when they look at it, they won't just see a wedding day. They'll see a family built on sacrifice, on love, and on a mother who never stopped, believing she had a place in her daughter's life. I went to bed that night with tears in my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of pride, and of gratitude. I had stood my ground, not just for myself, but for Emily. And in doing so, I reminded us both that no one, not even someone with power, money, or pride, can erase the bond between a mother and her child. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel for more powerful life stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear.